Hi, I'm Mayor Jay Tipsray, and welcome to this edition of Chandler Inside and Out. Today, it's my pleasure to have in studio again for the second time since she was a Congresswoman, Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten, thank you for being here today.
It is great to be back here with you, Jay.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. I don't usually put a timestamp on my show, but since this is filming the day after the shutdown was resolved, I'm going to start with those questions first, talking a little bit about that, educate the public a little, and what have you. So again, thanks for being here, and we're going to get right into it. So the shutdown, the government shutdown, started on Friday at midnight, lasted through Monday. What was your take on that anyway?
Well, first of all, I have to say that my take was probably what most Americans are thinking, which is this is really disappointing and embarrassing and shameful. Like, really, you have one job, Congress. So it's been sad. You know, for the last handful of years, Congress has just been lurching from one crisis to the next and have consisted on what are called CRs, continuing resolutions. And a continuing resolution is what Congress passes when it can't do its job, which is to pass a budget. A continuing resolution is say, oh, we'll just kick the can down the road, we'll come back to it later. So they've been doing these short-term continuing resolutions, which, by the way, is really bad for our military.
Right.
Like, it's just so bad for our military. And the Secretary of the Navy just last week said, stop doing this. You've got to pass a budget. We've wasted $4 billion of the Navy's appropriated dollars over the last 9 CRs. And so we were really hoping that we could get a real budget done by Friday. But unfortunately, there was a partisan bill on Thursday in the House, and then on Friday in the Senate, things just totally fell apart. They couldn't find a compromise. And so there was a shutdown over the weekend. Now, the good news is that by Monday, middle of the day, cooler heads had prevailed in the Senate. They came up with a short-term solution, put a compromise together, and we were able to get government up and running last night. So really only one day of shutdown. But still, that's one day too many. It's shameful. The real challenge we face, though, Jay, is that this solution that was passed yesterday only lasts until February the 8th.
About 3 weeks.
Yeah,
So,
which means, you know, this brinksmanship is going to come back again in 3 weeks. And it's my hope, and what I've been calling for, is for everyone to just cool down, get together in a room, work out a bipartisan solution. Just, I mean, you know how to do this.
Right.
We've done it.
we have to do it.
Yeah.
We worked in the legislature.
That's right.
together.
When we were in the legislature, we did it. You do it every day on the city council. Congress should do it too.
I agree. I agree. So most Americans didn't feel the shutdown. It was more
Thank
of
goodness.
the drama associated with the 24-hour, 7 days a week coverage of the shutdown, which you know put everybody in a different light. So we got a continuing resolution. We haven't. When was the last time we had a budget?
Well, we've been operating on 9 continuing resolutions, so it's been close to 5. It's been over 4 years since we've had a budget. And that was an omnibus, so it was kind of not really a real budget.
Right.
We actually haven't had a proper budget, like a for real budget, since like 1996.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because Washington is really broken. I mean, it's very, very broken.
So what do you, in your perfect world, what do you want to see between now and when that resolution, the current one, expires February 8th? What do you think needs to occur? Put it
So
that way.
I'm part of a group called the Problem Solvers, and we're a bipartisan group of Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate. We meet every single week, and our whole focus is to solve problems. So we're not ideological. We don't care about, you know, the talking points. We're really just focused on like these common sense solutions. And everyone knows what needs to be done. We've got to figure out a long-term funding agreement for both defense and domestic spending instead of fighting over those things. They're both really important, right? So defense spending, we know, is very important here in Arizona. It's important for national security. And domestic spending is important because that's where we get money for bridges and roads and the things that we rely on here in Arizona. So we've got to get agreement on those 2 issues. We've got to do more about border security. That's a real problem here in Arizona that hasn't been addressed. Of course, there's an issue with our dreamers, who are the young people who are American except for in paperwork. We've got to make sure they're able to work and stay. And then we've got to address this issue around disaster relief funding. Remember, we had those huge storms, Texas, Florida, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and those communities are still devastated. We've got to make sure we're offering relief for those parts of our country. All of those things need to occur. I don't think we're going to get them all done by February the 8th, but if we can start chipping away at these big problems in a bipartisan way instead of this crazy media war they're doing.
Yes.
That's what I think people really need.
A lot of what was being talked about was Daca, which is what, deferred
action for childhood arrivals. That's fancy for dreamers. Now here in Arizona, we know who dreamers are. These are the kids who were born in another country but have grown up in Arizona, graduated from high schools, gone to our colleges, served in our military, but don't have citizenship. And so in the past administration, there was a work permit for these young people that would allow them to work until Congress came up with a path to citizenship for them. A lot of people don't realize this, but these kids, there's no way for them to become citizens. Like there's no line to get in or paper to fill out. So we really have to solve that problem. The deadline for that is March 5th.
And that played into this a lot. And there's people from both parties that think that issue needs to be resolved.
Yeah. You know, Jay, we've got a bipartisan solution that addresses both border security and taking care of dreamers. In the House, I'm an original co-sponsor of this bill called the USA Act. And we've got over 50 co-sponsors. We have over 218 votes to pass this bill. We're just trying to get the speaker to put the bill on the floor, and you know how hard that is.
Because if it's a standalone bill, it votes up or down.
Yeah.
And I didn't catch last night with all the news stuff. We had a council meeting, but what kind of guarantee or commitment did Mitch McConnell make, the majority leader of the
That's
Senate?
right. So the big fight was really in the Senate, and that's where the talks broke down and things fell apart. And so on Sunday night, Mitch McConnell pledged that there would be a vote on an immigration package by February the 8th, and it would address both border security, which is very important here in Arizona, and it would address the question of dreamers who are losing their work permits by March 5th.
Right.
And it's actually really bad for us here in Arizona economically, because these kids are like educated, smart, they've got good jobs, and they're real contributors. So that was Mitch's commitment to do that in the Senate. There isn't currently a commitment in the House, so that's something we're working on to really make sure that the House does its job once the Senate votes on a bill.
Because whatever happens, again, it's going to have to come through both houses, and it's going to have to get up to the president.
A lot of people forget about that, you know?
Yeah, we don't work in a box there. The other issue that got a lot of play, and I don't know how real it was CHIP, you know.
Yes, CHIP was actually a very big deal. So last night I voted to fund the CHIP program for 6 years, which is actually the longest authorization we've had in our country's history. CHIP's a very big deal in Arizona. In Arizona, most people don't know what CHIP is. It's kids care.
Right.
And Kids Care is a really, really popular and important healthcare program. It basically provides subsidized healthcare for low-income kids.
Right.
So these are kids of working families.
Right.
So parents have a job, but the job doesn't provide health insurance. And so this allows kids to get access to healthcare at a lower rate than in the private market, but still get good quality care. It actually saves money.
Right.
So there was an analysis done by the budget office in Congress, and they reported that our national government will save over $690 billion by providing this program. Because when these kids have health care, then they're not going to the ER and getting their care. And then citizens like you and I aren't paying for their health care. So we got Kids Care reauthorized last night. That's a big deal.
For 6 years.
For 6 years.
You don't have to deal with that on February 8th again.
Thank goodness. And then there's a couple of things I'm really proud of that we got done last night. One was a bill to delay the health insurance tax. And this has been my chief healthcare priority for the last about 4 years.
Right.
The health insurance tax is a tax that, if it went into effect, would cost families and businesses, particularly small businesses, as much as $4,000 a year in additional costs. Right. So you could see in it like $400 per person per year in additional costs just from this tax. So we got that tax delayed. That's a big deal in Arizona. And then we also got the medical device tax delayed. That's important in Arizona because we have big companies like Medtronic and small companies like Urethra that make medical devices. If you have a tax on it, that cuts into their R&D, makes them less productive, and then we fall behind China.
Is that over and above a sales tax?
Oh, yes. It's a special tax just on medical devices. And so what it really does is it passes that tax on to consumers. So if someone needs a stent, or if someone gets a balloon in their heart, all of those are items that would be taxed additionally above and beyond the cost of the actual product.
Right.
That's just dumb.
So CHIP is really Kids Care then?
Yep.
They're fun.
Kids Care.
And I supported that when I was in the legislature.
Yes, we worked on this together.
Yes, we did. Very important issue.
Well, it actually saves money. I think a lot of people don't realize that. They think, oh, this is a charity program. No, it saves money.
Because of the emergency room cost. If everybody who has a cold or the flu or sore throat goes to the emergency room when they don't necessarily need to go
You're
to the
talking
emergency
thousands
room.
of dollars.
Right.
But if they've got kids care, they can go to their doctor. They can even go to urgent care. It's just, $5, $10.
Right.
It's so much cheaper because it's covered by this insurance mechanism. So it's good for everyone.
So we got till February 8th.
Yeah.
You got the bipartisan group. You're working on
Fingers
that.
crossed, right?
And then are the leaders of the both House and the Senate, both parties, are they going to be meeting with the president and his folks, or how do you see
It's my
that?
hope that they do. I mean, we've all watched, and I've watched just like every other American. We've watched the heavy dysfunction that that leadership is engaged in.
Yes.
They're just on all sides have been really partisan,
Right.
and they're much more interested in this like political posturing and
Yeah.
and the talking points instead of just solving problems. And it's really my hope that after last night that people can just cool down, get in a room together, and work out a deal.
Let's hope for that. We'll
Yeah.
wish you the best on that. We're going to all be watching that as we get closer to
Fingers
that
crossed,
deadline,
right?
and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Just real briefly on that, and then we'll go to some other stuff because this is all kind of late breaking. So we've had these government shutdowns. The
Yeah.
last one was in 2013. There's been
Yeah.
a couple of them
Yeah.
since the 2000s, 3 or 4 or 5, something
So
like that.
there were two in the 90s with Bill Clinton. That was in
Okay.
95. Then we had a nice patch where government was running a little bit more effectively. And then remember in 2013, my first year in Congress,
Right.
they shut down the government for 16 days.
Yeah.
It was shameful. It was
Yeah.
absolutely shameful.
Crazy.
And then this is the one since then. Luckily, this really only interrupted government progress for one day. But even one day is it's just shameful.
Yeah.
Shameful.
We'll be watching that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you? You got a kind of a unique background, maybe a
Yeah.
little bit about your political background
Sure.
too, before you became a
Sure.
congresswoman from the state of Arizona.
Well, I am a little bit different. Everyone knows that about me. I'm a little bit different than most people in politics. So, I was born and raised right here in Arizona. That's kind of rare, but I'm a Tucson native. So when I was in elementary school, though, it was the early 80s,
Right.
it was a tough time economically. My dad lost his job. My parents got divorced. And so I actually experienced a childhood that's a little bit different than most people. We were homeless for about 3 years of my childhood. And, this isn't something that a lot of people knew about for me. It was a tough time in my life. We actually lived in this, my mom was a single mom for a while, and we actually lived in this old abandoned gas station,
Right.
kind of like a country gas station, and didn't have running water or electricity. And, that experience really informed who I became as an adult. And that's why I care so deeply about programs like Kids Care, right? Because the Kids Care program is a healthcare program for kids, kind of like when I was a kid. And it just makes sure that, kids aren't going to be hurt through no fault of their own. And so my own experience growing up, in poverty and homelessness really taught me how important it is to try and give people a helping hand when they need one.
Right.
But, one of the things I learned when I ran for the legislature, I got to the legislature and I was elected in 2004.
When I was 2002.
That's right. You were already there.
I was there.
And one of the things I learned when I got there was how important business is to the good functioning of our community, because
Right.
that's where you drive the jobs, that's where you get the revenue to pay for the things that we care about, like Kids Care. And so I learned a lot about business and how important business is to our community. And really, that's a story of people who work really hard and just fight for the American dream. So my life has really been kind of a combination of those two things, like work
Yeah.
really hard, but help those when they need it. And that's led me to kind of be where I am in an unusual political space, which is really sitting right there in the middle,
Right.
understanding where people on the right are and the people on the left are, working together, trying to find common ground. And luckily, I was able to do that in the legislature.
Yes.
I was lucky because they were good people to work with, right?
Yeah,
we
there
worked
was.
together a lot.
We worked together.
Yeah.
We did.
And then I went off to Congress because they could use some of that,
Yeah, and let's get back to that thought. I'm going to reintroduce the show, and then I want to talk about you going to Congress.
Got it.
I'm Mayor Jay Tipsherini. You're watching Chandler Inside Now today. It's our honor to have in studio Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. Thanks for coming to Chandler today. We always like having you out here.
It's my pleasure.
So you served in the legislature, in the House, then you went to the Senate in the
Yeah.
legislature, and then in 2012,
yeah.
you
You
ran
were
for-
already back here at the city by then, right?
I had come
yeah,
back.
Yeah, I remember.
You went to D.C., I went to Chandler.
I feel like you might be smarter. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I like to get things done. Not that you don't like to get things done, but unfortunately,
It's a challenging climate.
DC is a tough place to get things done.
Yeah. But that's actually our campaign, kind of our joke on our team, both in the campaign and in our government office, is GSD. We get stuff done. That's what we do. So I ran for Congress because I really felt like they needed more help being practical and pragmatic and getting stuff done.
True.
So ran for Congress, won, and I'm now in my 6th year there. And really what I've been focused on is how do we get stuff done, particularly in a politically charged and dysfunctional climate. Everyone knows Washington is broken. My goal is to go back to Washington each week and bring a healthy dose of pragmatism and what Arizona has a lot of, which is common sense.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about executive orders, because a lot of the stuff we've talked about, Affordable Care Act, Daca, illegal immigration issues, get done not from any one party, but by presidents who issue executive orders. I don't think most people understand what is that and what is the power of an executive order.
So an executive order is actually a very powerful tool. It's a tool that the president uses to create law. Now, it's only short-term law because it can be revoked or amended by any future president.
Right.
Not like a bill, which becomes a law in statute.
Yeah.
Only Congress can change those. But an executive order is something the president has the power and the authority to determine how to set law and policy. And the president's authority to do executive orders is fairly significant as long as it doesn't conflict with anything that Congress has passed in a law or the Constitution, of course. And what we've seen over the last, I would say probably since Reagan, an increasing use of executive actions by presidents. So this is not a partisan thing. Democrat and Republican presidents use executive orders.
True.
And in particular, since Congress has been pretty dysfunctional since the late mid-90s or so, presidents started using executive action even more. So in the mid-90s, when Clinton was having big fights with Newt Gingrich, he started using executive action. Then Bush used it, then Obama used it. And now President Trump is using executive action very, very broadly to actually make changes around policy and law.
Right.
It's legal to do, but sometimes there's question about whether or not the president's executive authority is excessive, and that's where the courts come in. So there's always court cases testing that authority. But generally speaking, presidents have a lot of executive authority. And what I've seen is in the last 20 plus years, presidents have been using executive orders more because of their acrimonious relationship with Congress. So when Congress doesn't do its job and pass the laws that need to be passed, the president just looks at that hole, right, and says, I'm going to fill the vacuum with my ideas. And Congress doesn't like it.
Right.
I personally think it's not the best way to do policy.
Right.
But a big way to solve that problem is for Congress to stand up and do its job.
And that's called all interrelated into the shutdown and executive orders that got acted on, got rescinded, whatever happened.
That's right.
But stuff not getting done, that happens.
Right.
Shutdown happens, and then you got.
That's exactly right. So in 2012, President Obama created this work permit for these young dreamers through executive action. And what I said at the time was Congress should do this. We should do it through law. This should be statute. Because when you do something through executive action, it doesn't last. And any future president can change it. And a lot of people are like, oh, that'll never happen. Of course it will happen. And of course, President Trump earlier this year rescinded or removed those work permits. And so those work permits expire on March 5th. And at
the time he did that, he said,
Congress better fix it through statute.
Yes, that's what he said.
And that's what he said. And that actually is the appropriate path. Congress should take care of this and every other legislative issue. The challenge we have is Congress has really been broken for quite some time.
Right.
Can't seem to muster up the goodwill to do its job.
Interesting. We'll watch that. So we're about a week away from the State of the Union address. I know the president talked a lot about infrastructure when he was running for office. I understand he's maybe going to unveil some stuff. Some of it's leaked out, some of it hasn't leaked out. Talk a little bit about the infrastructure and what you see. And I know we're speculating right now.
Well, it's very clear that the president cares deeply about infrastructure. I would actually say of all the policy issues that he and his administration have addressed, infrastructure is the one where he feels the most personal passion. It's also in his wheelhouse, right? Because he's a real estate guy. So that's where he has knowledge and expertise, and it's where he's most comfortable. I've had the opportunity to meet with the president on 2 separate occasions, one in a very small group setting, one in a medium group setting. And he talked about infrastructure both times. He really wants to get it done. What he doesn't yet have is a coalition of the willing in Congress. So earlier this week, a document leaked that is supposed to be a rough draft of his infrastructure plan, but we're not sure if it's 100% accurate. We'll get more details at the State of the Union address, which is coming up on Tuesday, where he's going to unveil the whole plan. But we do know that he's interested in expanding infrastructure in rural areas. That's actually really important for Arizona because we need broadband, we need roads, we need investment in infrastructure in our rural communities in Arizona. And you know this, there are some parts of rural Arizona where we still have struggled with folks getting access to, basic services.
True.
He also wants to make sure that he's increasing security and support for our water and our electrical systems. I support that 100%. We do have to protect those systems, particularly in this day and age of cyber terrorism, where bad guys are seeking not just to hurt our country through traditional warfare, but more and more they're seeking to do it through cyber activity.
Yeah.
So if they can crack into our grids and our networks, that can really debilitate our communities and really hurt our ability to get access to clean water and power. So those are things that I'm really looking forward to. The challenge is that the president hasn't said how he's going to pay for it. So
I was going to ask that.
and you and I, this is something we share. We're
got to pay.
Pretty fiscally conservative,
Yes,
right? That's
right.
In Arizona, we care about our community. We want to do good work in our community, but we want to watch the taxpayer's pocketbook. And as we come from the state legislature, you don't get to buy things if you can't pay for it, right? You don't get to do
True.
this deficit spending. In Congress, they do all this deficit spending. They spend like drunken sailors. So
I never quite understood that either. The
Yes.
debt and being underwater like we are.
Oh, it's
How
horrible.
it works, but
Our
yeah.
debt is very significant. We're at nearly $21 trillion of debt. And with the new tax bill that just went into effect in December, that adds another about $1.5 trillion. I mean, it's pretty significant. So we've got to make fundamental changes in how we bring in revenue and how we spend to create balance. If you ran your household like this, you'd lose your house, right?
Yes.
So the president hasn't articulated how he wants to pay for the infrastructure package. That's something I'm paying a lot of attention to. I believe that infrastructure will be an economic net plus for us here in Arizona, and we need it, but we got to pay for it. You
do.
just can't keep spending taxpayer dollars without being accountable for it.
I wonder if he'll lay out, here's my plan and here's how you pay for it.
I hope so.
Because infrastructure is very, very expensive,
It is.
no matter what kind of infrastructure you're talking about.
It's probably a $1 trillion package, probably. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I know for folks who are watching this, they're thinking to themselves, $1 trillion, that's insane. Yes, yes it is.
Yeah.
But that's probably what a package costs for the whole national infrastructure plan. And then the question is, where do you get $1 trillion, right? I don't think that you should do deficit spending to pay for that. That's irresponsible.
Yeah, no, we'll watch that. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
You serve on a couple committees and
Yeah.
subcommittees. Talk a little bit about your committees, subcommittees, and maybe some of the stuff
Sure.
you're passionate about that you're working on in those committees.
Well, I'm really lucky to serve on the Financial Services Committee. And as the only Arizonan who serves on that committee, I really feel it's incumbent on me to be the voice for all of Arizona when it comes to financial services. And this is an important committee. We do a lot of work around banking and financing. We do a lot of work around making sure we're building in financial protections. So for instance, I've been working on a bill called the Senior Safe Act that provides protections for seniors who are at the most vulnerable for being victims of fraud, right? Actually, a couple of years ago, I did a fraud training for some folks right here in Chandler, and I used one of your libraries, so thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We find that 1 in 5 seniors in Arizona has been a victim of financial fraud. And that's really dangerous. And right now, our financial services companies aren't allowed to provide enough protection for them because they can get in legal trouble. So I want to change that law so that they're shielded from liability if they stop a transaction because they're worried about fraud, et cetera. So that's one area that I work on. The other thing that I'm doing a lot of work on is on actually financial systems in crime and terrorism. So we have a new subcommittee that focuses on how to stop financial transactions by transnational criminal groups, by like the Sinaloa drug cartel, right? That's bringing drugs and guns back and forth across our border. That's a big deal in Arizona. We actually just passed a bill out of committee last week to build a national strategy to try and crack down on the financial systems of these transnational drug cartels. We've also done a lot of work to try and get the government to build a cohesive whole of government strategy around terrorism financing, right? So these groups, particularly ISIS, they're more powerful than other terrorism groups because they have money. And that money allows them to plan terrorist activities all around the world.
Yeah.
So we've been working to try and find where their source of money is and then crack down on it, shut their banking transactions down.
Good.
So those are some of the things we're working on. And then a final thing we're working on is stuff to try and just cut the red tape for people.
Good.
So we just passed a bill last week to do a review of all financial regulations every 7 years, and then cull out the ones that are unnecessary or overburdensome, so that every 7 years we're cleaning house and getting rid of the stuff that just slows businesses down, get rid of the red tape, and make it easier for people to do their jobs.
Yeah. Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Got a couple minutes left. Had a question on gridlock. I think we've already talked about gridlock. Let's talk about working out. I read about you, and I kind of try to work out when my knees will let me work out these days. But you do endurance stuff, marathons. Yeah. Number one, tell us a little bit about that, and how do you find time to do that? Because you're on a plane 4 times a week.
My staff asks that question all the time. And well, first of all, I'm really committed to living a healthy lifestyle, particularly in this really high stress, really toxic political climate we live in. I find it's a way for me to be happy and healthy, and to really be in the right frame of mind every day to do my job, which I am just so grateful and lucky to do. The second reason is we live in the most beautiful place in the world, right? Like
yes.
When I wake up in the morning, all I want to do is go be outside. So I'm hiking, I'm running, I'm biking, I'm swimming. You know, where else in the country can you swim outdoors year round?
Yeah, true.
Right? We're so lucky.
Yeah.
So it's part of what I do to keep myself healthy and happy, but it's also, for me, an opportunity to provide an example to other people about choosing to live a healthy lifestyle. It allows you to perform better at work.
True.
You're kinder with your family and your friends. You have reduced healthcare costs, right? Because you're living an active, healthy lifestyle. And there's nothing more fun than participating in a race with thousands of your constituents, right? So just a couple of weeks ago, I did the half marathon at Rock and Roll.
Rock and Roll?
And the entire marathon's in my district.
Wow.
So it was wonderful. I was running with constituents. I saw constituents on the sideline. If I hadn't been so tired, I would have waved to more of them. But they were cheering me on as I was running. And I thought to myself when I finished, one, that was really hard. And number two, I set an example for other people. And I hope that they'll think to themselves, let's be grateful for our bodies, our health, but also grateful for this place we live in, right? We're so lucky.
What was your time?
I finished in 1:59.
That's quick.
Yeah, well, my goal was 1:55.
That's good.
You might remember,
impressed.
I broke my foot last year.
Oh.
So I had to have surgery on my foot last year. So I've been rehabbing and building my strength back up. So I did finish in under 2 hours.
That's awesome.
I was pretty happy.
I love exercise. And everything you said, you're right on target with that.
You should come run with me sometime.
Maybe. I'm still working on I had a little bit of knee problems, so.
Well, if you got knee problems, we should probably bike then.
Bike is good. I do my bike.
Yeah.
I've gotten into biking.
And it's perfect weather, right?
Yes.
Every
awesome.
morning I go out to bike, I get a little bit overwhelmed with gratitude of how lucky we are to live in this place.
Yeah.
There's sometimes I'll be out riding, maybe up in Cave Creek or down a South Mountain, and I'm in danger of falling off the bike because I'm so busy staring at the mountains and just thinking how gorgeous it is. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, the road.
You're wearing your helmet, right?
Oh, of course. Very safe, very safe. But it's just, what a privilege to live in such a beautiful place.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'd like to go on, but
let's go for a ride though.
Let's do it.
Okay, good.
Let's do it. Thanks for coming out to Chandler today.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Good information, and we'll watch you closely as things progress in Washington, D.C.
Thanks so much.
I'm Mayor Jay Tibshirney. You've been watching Chandler Inside and Out. Hope you enjoyed the show. I did. Till I see you again, take care and be safe.